All right, we'll get started with the 2015 State of College Baseball Press Conference. To my right, I've got Damani Leach, the NCAA Managing Director of Championships and Alliances, Dave Hickey, Director of Athletics at Central Michigan University and the Chair of the NCAA Baseball Committee, and Craig Kylitz, the Executive Director of the American Baseball Coaches Association. As a reminder, once again, please silence your cell phones, and all recording devices must be turned off that are video related during the press conferences. Please introduce yourself, name, and entity that you represent. That is for the transcribing of the quotes. And we'll begin with an opening statement from Damani.
Thanks, Glenn. Happy to be here today. Thanks for everybody for showing up. Certainly, the state of baseball, I think we feel really good about where college baseball is right now, as well as the baseball championship. Dave and the committee did a great job working hard to evaluate teams throughout the season and then putting together a great bracket and administering the tournament up to this current point. We're really excited about the 8 teams that we have here in Omaha this week. Certainly 8 great, strong brands, great fan bases, certainly great players when you look at who was drafted here recently. So all of that's really exciting. And then from a fan standpoint as well, really excited about the World Series here in Omaha and all the things that we have in store. So again, really excited about it.
We'll open the floor for questions. Howard in the back.
Howard Borden, Omaha, K-Show Radio. First of all, welcome back, everybody. Question for Dave. As the overall chairman of the Division I committee, putting together the field of 64, that's a daunting task. That is not easy to do with parity around the country. I guess my question to you is, with the committee members, how do you feel about now looking back at what you went through in February, March, April, May, tracking the teams, coming up with the difficulty of bracketing everything, and 6 1 seeds are here, a 3 seed and a 2 seed, and here we go.
Well, absolutely. I thought the committee did an outstanding job. We work very hard throughout the entire season to evaluate teams, to monitor progress of teams. We're working in different regions. Committee members are assigned to different regions. So we track the game during the regular season very, very closely. Our work when we get to Indianapolis is challenging. There are, as you said, parity and the ability of our programs to listen, to put themselves in the best position to be evaluated by the committee has made it challenging. Has made it, those fine lines have become finer, that you're beginning to split those hairs. And so we had a lot of outstanding ball clubs, and I think we put together a very good field. Looking back, I think it's been some drama-filled baseball. There's been some incredible matchups, and it, once again, provided some great stories, and we get to Omaha with a tremendous field. So from a committee standpoint and the chair, I feel very, very good about where we are, and looking forward to the new chapter that will come out of here at Omaha.
Thank you. Here on the right.
Yeah, it's Pat Borsey with the New York Times. I'd like all of you to address this if you could. The flat seam ball appears to have accomplished its purpose. Home runs are up, offense is up. I'm wondering what kind of feedback you're getting from coaches about it, because a couple of guys were in here a little earlier and they thought that perhaps an even livelier ball might be the next step here.
Craig, if you can begin.
Sure. Well, it's a great question. And throughout the year, I've been talking to coaches around the country in all divisions, but Division I in particular, talking about what they feel about the new ball. And I'll tell you this, going into it, I don't know if the coaches felt like the flat seam was going to be the answer. And so we were able to put together a survey, and we'll survey our coaches often throughout the year on different issues, and this is probably the most important issue at this time. But I'll release this to everyone. But here's the 5 questions. What is your overall impression of the new flat seam baseball? And either highly favorable or favorable, we were at 90%, 89.8% are highly favorable or favorable with the new ball. And then we said, speaking on behalf of your players, what is the general feedback you've received about the new flat seam baseball from your hitters? and that is at 87.2%. So they're in favor of it. Now, the one that was probably the most interesting is throughout the fall, what we were hearing is the pitchers may have a difficult time throwing either the slider, the curveball, probably the changeup would work well for them, but they were worried about that. But question 3 is, speaking on behalf of your players, what is the general feedback you have received about the new flat seam baseball from your pitchers? And they're at 68% are either highly favorable or favorable on pitchers. And then the other one I think is equally as important is either neutral or no difference, 24.2%. So overwhelming, the pitchers are in favor of the new ball as well. And just talking to the coaches and so forth, they feel the breaking ball's working better, slider. And interesting enough, and the science doesn't back this up, both the coaches and the student athletes feel like they throw the ball harder. And the numbers are showing that. And now we don't have a comparison study to go against that, but that was interesting. Then on 4, do you feel that the new flat seam baseball has improved the college game as it was intended? This is very important. We're looking at 89.6% of our coaches feel that has done that. And that is great news to us. And then the last question, I thought this was equally as important. Do you feel the further changes to equipment are needed to improve the college game? And if so, explain. And they gave some comments on that. We're sitting at no, 81.8%. So 81.8% feel that these are the changes that really improved our game and we didn't need further changes. Now, I know with just human nature, we're going to be talking about this next year after, what other tweaks, but those are the raw data, and I'll be able to get this online, and we can just probably get that so you can get all of this information.
Dave, do you have anything to add?
No, I think, from the committee's perspective, we're always very aware of the, equipment and modifications of equipment. It's an important part of the game, but we've got to also manage and respect the integrity of the game and how it's played. So we feel very, very good about where the ball and what it has done for the game. Again, on the ground, talking to players as I do, being at games and talking to coaches, everyone has been very pleased with the performance of the ball. It has directly impacted to this point an improvement for our game. That the ball flies a little bit better, and we seem to be very pleased with that. And it doesn't seem to have any negative impacts. When we hear about pitching, and from every angle, it seems to be positive. So, as I said, as we get to Omaha, let's get the wind blowing out, and we'll have lots of home runs here. So, there's the elements and there's those pieces that are important. But we are very pleased with the ball and the performance of that, and we'll continue to monitor that. We'll continue to look at it. It's important, and but right now we feel really good about it.
Damani?
I think I would just kind of shed a little light on more process than anything. In terms of how we interact with the ABCA. And so Craig and I talk throughout the year. They do a great job of teasing out a lot of those kinds of issues through their ability to survey all of the coaches and get away from the extremes of just, one coach who has the microphone and what they happen to say, and really give us some great data to rely on. And then we meet with them. So Craig brings in 4 or 5 coaches every fall and meets in person with the baseball committee. We spend half a day talking about some championship and some non-championship related issues. And then during selection weekend, sometimes we just kind of get to a point where we're sick of arguing, and then we'll also dedicate time to talk about non-championship issues, and did that again this year, spending about an hour or so talking about those kinds of issues. So just from a process standpoint, that's how that information tends to flow throughout the year.
Howard. Actually, Howard, let's skip you and move up here to the 4th row.
Mike Lanana, Baseball America. For Damani and Dave, this year there were a couple of unusual hosting scenarios with Lake Elsinore, and then the super regionals with Arkansas hosting Missouri State. Just what's your take on how those unfolded, and do you view those as successful?
Damani, if you could begin.
Okay, I guess I'll go first. Well, I'll talk about the history of it, and you can talk about your perspective on this year. I guess the first thing I'd say is it's not terribly uncommon. We have institutions that, for one reason or another, are unable to host. We've seen it in recent years, and they've hosted off campus. Sometimes it's right off campus at a local minor league ballpark. At other times, it's a little further down the road. We saw that with Purdue, and this year with Santa Barbara. So as we talked through it with the committee, we wanted to make sure they understood sort of the history of this happening. So that's not uncommon. And then again, in the sort of the Arkansas, Missouri State scenario, you do in some cases get institutions that just don't submit bids for latter rounds. And we try to tell institutions at that time, hey, you only submitted for this first round. Did you mean to do that? And sometimes they'll submit it, but in other cases they're just facility conflicts. And in that case, we'll go to another site. So that, again, that's not uncommon. We saw that a few years ago, when Cal hosted it at Santa Clara. So again, not uncommon, and that's the kind of information we try to deliver to the committees as they're making their decision. But in terms of how this year went, I'll let Dave talk about that.
Well, yeah, I just bounce off of Damani a little bit. The committee is well informed at all times of the hosting positions of different programs, and we understand the dilemmas that they may be faced. So we're taking that into consideration as we select hosts. First and foremost, we look at performance. That's where we start with the field. That's how we seed the teams, and that's how we ultimately move into the hosting rounds. Performance and the background of those programs is what gets them into a position to be considered. And then we look at some of those other things. From my perspective, I feel that both scenarios worked out. They are what they are to a degree, but I thought they worked out. The Cal Santa Barbara situation was unique, but we saw good crowds. We saw excellent baseball there. It allowed the game to grow a little bit in that region, move around, and maybe allowed for some other people to attend that might not have if it was located in a different location. So from our perspective, we thought it worked, and we were pleased with it. Every situation has its unique characteristics, but we're very careful to listen to what the NCAA lays out for us, respect where those teams are, how that may impact those teams, but then make the very best decision we think we can
if
make.
I could just follow up, what we'll do after the fact from a formal standpoint is then survey everybody who was involved. So we survey the teams who were there. Tell us about your experience. How did it go? We have site reps that we send there. We survey them, get their feedback, get feedback from the umpires. What was the experience there for you? And then build that into sort of our historical documents so that when we go back to sites where we've been in previous years, we keep notes on those, and then we'll follow up with those institutions to say, hey, you're going to be hosting again. Here are 3 or 4 things that came up last time. Want to make sure you've taken care of those.
Let's go, Howard, then we'll come in here at the front.
Yeah, Dave, a follow-up question, and I know this is difficult. How difficult is it sometimes in the seeding process when you look at the teams geographically, what you have, what's on the plate, so to speak, and where you have to send them, and then people look at the 2 and 3 and 4, they're going, well, why aren't they there, and why is somebody here? It's kind of interesting because people are starting to follow that more and more. That's hard to do, isn't it? I mean, as far as balancing that all, are you pleased with that process of geographically how you have to maybe send certain teams to certain parts of the country, and then try to regionalize it as well for economies of scale as well, I guess?
Sure, and again, we start with the principle of rewarding teams based on the performance, and that is how we select our national seeds, and certainly all of our 1 seeds. That begins to dictate how the regionalization, so to speak, starts to be defined, and then we begin to slot in our other teams per the championships requirements. We have a regional nature to the championships, so we look for those alignments, and that's how we build the field. With respect of seeding, we never allow that to somehow not, we don't allow the integrity of the seeding to be compromised, but we will regionalize to a certain nature. And I've said this before, it has been great for the game. There are some tremendous regionals. While those are closely confined and teams come from a real similar area, it's also builds great fan interest. It's outstanding from a student-athlete perspective, from mothers, fathers, families, friends, to be there, to attend. I mean, those are all real decisions. Those are all real considerations that we need to take into account, and as we build those, and not least to say, those places that are hosting, they enjoy having large crowds. There is a risk to those schools that are hosting from a financial perspective, and that's good. Again, as an athletic director sitting in that chair, I understand those dynamics as well. So, feel it's not easy, but feel good about how we build the field.
Pete?
Pete LaFleur, College Baseball 360. This whole thing with the scheduling of the sites is a pretty common thing we hear from our followers and fans. So I just had a couple of things. If you guys could clarify, I pretty much know the answers, but it would just be good for you guys to mention them. The first was someone said, well, couldn't Missouri State have worked something out with the minor league team? And I believe there's a policy that that the NCAA has the facility for the duration, and that you can't share it date off and on throughout the days. If you
Correct.
could comment on that. The second one is reopening the bidding if neither team has bid. So like if St. John's had won that one side, you guys would have reopened it, correct?
Correct.
And then the other thing is what options did Missouri State have? Like how far could they go? Is there a certain thing that the NCAA likes? Because obviously you see Santa Barbara went 2 hours. Is that kind of pushing the limit?
Yeah.
If you could just touch on those real quick, just for the record, so we have all that.
So yeah, just in short, the first two are correct. The last one, there is no hard and fast standard about how far away you can go to host. We did have that conversation about Santa Barbara. One about fans, just financially, how viable is it going to be if you're playing somewhere out of your traditional footprint. But then the other is operational. And again, we're expecting that host institution to run that event and to run it like an NCAA championship per our policies. And so in a lot of cases, that means staff being able to have ready access to that facility throughout the week and also in the weeks leading up to the bid process. So if it's someplace that's several hours away, it's going to be difficult for you as an institution to manage that facility if it's a minor league facility that's not used to hosting NCAA events. So that one's a little more of a gray area in terms of how far we're willing to go. But we very much had that conversation in the selection process.
Sorry, I had one more quick one. I was actually at Arkansas and then went to Illinois, two vastly different facilities. And in each case, the visiting team always gets 600 tickets. Has the committee ever discussed having some type of tiering based on capacity, especially when they're that far apart?
We haven't talked about that.
We have not had that conversation. That's been a policy in the handbook of how the tickets have been developed. We have not had that conversation.
No.
Lou?
Lou Pavlovich, Collegiate Baseball. This is for all three dignitaries up there. I'm curious, going back to the flat seam ball question, what does the College World Series factor in this whole equation? It sounds like 85% of the coaches really like what they're seeing with pitching, hitting. But if you still have 3 home runs this year, what are you going to do? So I'm curious, each of the three of you, what would be the next step if we remain at 3? Because pitching is still pretty good here.
Craig, could you address this question first?
Well, I personally feel there's a couple different parts to that. Everybody thinks it's the equipment or the fence distance, wind, so forth, variables. But the one thing that I don't hear much about is the level of pitching. I know people have touched on it, so it's not a new idea. But when you're facing everybody's number 1, number 2, sometimes seeing a 3, and they have a day off between each one, the level of pitching is so high that we're going to see less home runs. The thing I personally would like to see, because I think fans would like to see this, is for it to not change the game. So a ball that is hit very well and should be a home run and turns into an out, that's where I have a problem, not just the pure number of home runs, where it could change the outcome of a game based on the fence distance. And with that, the one thing I hope everybody does is let's see how it plays out so we can make a very sound decision moving forward. The easy thing is that, well, let's move the fences. Do we move them into, is it too close? Is it not close enough? So I think there's a lot that has to go into it. But I think we made a great step in the first direction with the ball change. We'll let it play out and see how it takes place and see what it does for our championship.
Yeah, I just add one. I think we have the privilege of watching great pitching. Pitching has never been better in our game. There's just outstanding pitchers, and it's hard to hit. It is hard. I think we've taken a very good approach at studying what's going on with the ball to make good data-driven decisions, and I think that's important. We all have, from the cuff thoughts, and we like to express those sometimes, but you've got to step back and really evaluate that and in its totality, not just what we did here or there, but how that all comes together. That's right for our regular season. It's also right for the championships, and those all need to be brought together and then discussed a little bit more, and then we'll make a good decision. I know we'll do that.
I think one of the other nuances to look at is also sort of on the defensive side is where outfielders are lining up. I think we all noticed last year towards the end of the series, I mean, the outfielders were basically playing deep infield. And so the threat of the home run is another thing that we hope to see back into the game this year. So the threat of the home run, outfielders playing a little bit further out, more true in terms of their natural position, which is going to open up offense. So you may not see as many home runs, but you may see singles and doubles in critical situations that are still moving people around the bases.
John?
John Niantel with the Omaha World Herald. I want to ask about the RPI. So for Craig, just what has the reaction been from the coaches now? What are we, 4 years into the changes of the formula weighted for road wins? And Dave, do you guys, as a committee, is it hard not to, I guess, is it hard not to use that formula or focus too much on that formula? The parameters obviously can give you a pretty good indication of how good a team is, but I just wonder if it, when you're in the selection process, trying to pull in other data and not just that, and trying to make your decision, is it difficult to sort of, just use that as part of the process?
Craig, if you'd begin.
Coaches first.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I hear very, very little to no talk from coaches. I really don't. And the other thing, I know the committee does a tremendous job using it as a tool and certainly not a guide. And so those are my two thoughts on it. But I've not heard coaches really talk much about the RPI at all.
Yeah, the RPI for us is one of the indicators, one of the ways we can begin to categorize teams. But I think if there are some teams that would be very clear with you that we didn't use the RPI correctly. So, and I've heard from them as well. But it is one of our tools, and we dig very deep into the information that we're provided. The trending, the other performance measures of the year are all taken into consideration. It isn't a one-person choice. Our entire committee, really discusses that, goes over it extensively, and then begins to draw comparisons to groups of teams. So again, being on the committee twice, I've seen it evolve, I've seen it grow, the formula, through my 7+ years of being a committee member. I think we're in a very good place. I do not see people just, it is a forced ranking to a degree, but I don't see a lot of people just following the rankings exclusively. When we make decisions in the room, that does not happen. I know that doesn't happen. So I don't know if there's anything.
I would add just two things that I noticed. One is the committee members relying on each other and the regional advisory committees quite a bit, and specifically when the regional advisory committee ranks teams differently than the RPI in that particular reason. So we have a lot of conversation about that. We rely a lot on those coaches in those regions to say, hey, how do you have those teams in the ACC ranked, for example? Because that may be different than the way the RPI has them ranked. And why? Let's talk about that. And then we also have a great staff in the room that challenges the committee a lot as well to say, hey committee, here's how you guys now kind of have these teams. Are you thinking about this? Are you thinking about that? Look at who their opponents were in their conference. And we talked a lot about that this year, sort of the imbalance of conference schedules. And some, you're in the same conference, but conference schedules and conference opponents can be very, very different. So a lot of those things don't necessarily get factored into the RPI.
And I'd just say there isn't, and I've said this many times, there is no one indicator that's the trump card that causes you to make that decision. Each one of those evaluations is different in a way, and you have to try to align those factors and those performance measures, and then draw an outcome from that. So,
Kendall.
Kendall Rogers, D1 Baseball. Guys, this is primarily for Dave and Damani, but a lot of coaches this postseason have kind of brought up with me going to the 1 through 16 seeding. Probably more so than any other year I've had coaches come to me about it. I guess from your perspective, it seems like a lot of people want to do it. I guess from your perspective, how do you feel about that? How quick could it happen if it does happen? And what are the plus and minuses to it in your opinion?
Dave, if you'd begin.
Sure. I would say we don't have a lot of official conversations about that. Our charge is to seed those number ones and then determine the national seeds. That's the charge of the committee. We take that very seriously. Again, we know what's on the line all across the board and how important that is. That's what we do. So outside of something changing from, and that's not in the committee's responsibilities that they would change those parameters. We just follow those guidelines and then move forward. Certainly, we have opinions, and those are varied in the room. People have some different opinions on how we could do that. But right now, we've just really been focused on making sure we get the best national seeds and move forward. So I don't know if you want to add to that.
I think I would just sort of
Damani.
underscore the difficulty of that, and we do that now with the 1 through 8. That's just a series of votes and votes and votes and votes to get those rankings, almost really 2 by 2, 1 by 1 in some cases, and to do that then with 9 through 16 would be really, really difficult, and I don't know. So that would be on the downside. The other downside is you lose some of the regionalization, and Dave talked about those benefits. And in the upside, I don't know what you get out of it other than just feeling good that you're 9 and you're not 16, because the difference between those teams is so razor thin that it may look like you have a great matchup, but you may not actually have as great a matchup as you think.
Yeah, but for instance, if you had, let's say UC Santa Barbara as a 1 seed.
Yep.
And let's say UC Santa Barbara is a 1 seed, but you have Texas A&M, Florida State, Vandy, all teams that we all agree were in the mix for national seeds. There is a difference between those 3 teams and UC Santa Barbara, correct?
I mean, not just those teams specifically, but the committee certainly narrows down a group, particularly when you get to that 7th and 8th national seed. There's a group of 4 or 5 teams for that last 1 or 2 spots that are clearly different than the rest of the number 1 seed. So yeah, there's a difference competitively, but the difference between 9 and 10, I don't know.
We're going to go in the back, white shirt. Pete, we'll have you ask a question next.
Ty Richardson, KXUA. Kind of piggybacking off Pete's question earlier, 7 of the 8 super regional hosts went on to the College World Series. Would you guys ever consider ticket realignment just within the committee, just to kind of help balance out, just like if you host a super regional, you wouldn't automatically go to the College World Series?
I'm sorry, can you clarify the question?
Yeah, I'm not following exactly
So,
right.
7 of the 8 College World Series teams that hosted are now in the College World Series. There's only 1 that didn't host that went in. Would you guys consider realigning ticket sales at all to kind of even the fans distributed at different games at the Super Regional?
So you're asking about the 600 for visiting teams at the Super Regional and making that number larger, is that correct?
Again, we have not had that conversation. We're faced with somewhat of a unique circumstance this year with the Arkansas situation. We haven't done that. I guess that's my best answer. We have not. I'm not going to sit up here and try. We have not done that. So that for us at this time, that's not in our charge to do that. So.
Yeah.
As we follow up and we look back and we begin to evaluate those sites, we'll have some more conversation about the ticket.
Certainly, if we get feedback from schools saying they could have used more and wanted more, and then we could look at it. But again, we'd have to evaluate it across all sites, and at every site there isn't always the demand from the visiting team to go above 600, and then we deal with this in some of our other sports, and then so now you're starting to disadvantage the home team because they could have sold some tickets. They're holding tickets, then the visiting team doesn't take them, then the home team doesn't have time to sell them to their fans because it's too late. So then you get into a conversation about, are you now obligating the visiting team? Are they now financially on the hook for those tickets, whether they take them or not? And so we can have the conversation, but it takes you down a pretty different path.
There is that path of how you would allocate and who is obligated for those tickets. They're just not open, and we know we're going to sell. There is obligation to that, and schools have to meet those obligations one way or the other, whether they sell them or not at times. So, yeah, there's a lot of nuances to that we'd have to examine.
Pete?
Yeah, the thing about the tickets was that was also like what you're saying, Damani, like maybe the visiting team would have like a short window where they could commit to more,
Yep.
and then they would go back to the home team. Because I
Yeah,
can
you
guarantee
could.
you, I was there. Missouri State would have brought more than
Right,
600.
right.
And you know, it's a obscure thing, but you feel bad for them because they lost the hosting. And then,
Right.
and following up what Kendall mentioned, you might remember I asked you the same question last year because I cover the softball and they do seed 1 through 16. And there's two issues: is matching them up, but it's also essentially Florida and Florida State could not both be here.
Yeah.
Texas A&M and TCU could not both be here.
Right.
Back in the day, Clemson and South Carolina could not both be in Omaha.
Yeah.
And I think that's the catch-22 with a lot of the
Right.
fan bases. Is like they love those regional matchups, and it's great for ticket sales and everything, but they can't both come to the party.
Yeah.
So I think that's where it gets tricky, and I
Yeah.
would hope you guys will at least weigh that in, and I don't know if that's just a fan's perspective. The question I had for Craig and Dave is if you could guys just update us on where you see Northern baseball right now. And it was a hot button topic early with the weather, but obviously we've seen Illinois put together a great year, the Big Ten, Kent State was here a few years ago, obviously what Tracy Smith did at Indiana, just kind of where you guys see the Northern/Midwest baseball evolving.
Craig, could you begin?
Well, I went to school in Michigan, at Central Michigan University, oddly enough, but so I love to see Northern baseball do well. And I love to see it for two reasons. Selfishly, because that's where I'm from, but more importantly, because I think it's good for college baseball. What we saw this year, and then I think the way they did in regionals and so forth was, that it was more than just a good record from a Northern team. It was good baseball. And I think there's a reason for that. I think facilities in the North have greatly improved. I think the level of coaching has greatly improved, that programs are putting more of the resources in it, and they understand that that's what their fan base and students and area would like to see. And so I think the better that baseball gets in the North, the better it is for college baseball around the country. So I'm excited about where it seems to be trending anyways.
I'd echo that as well. Again, I'm a believer in the game and a fan of the game around the entire country. I do believe it's good for our game that we have success in all regions and that we compete. And there has been an investment made, and usually where those investments have been made in programs, you've seen results. And you see more investment in the Midwest and in the northern tier of baseball. And we think it's important, and we're going to invest in the sport, and we want to be competitive in the sport. And that's good for it.
Did the start date gain any traction, or was it was snowing in Mississippi?
Pete, we're gonna need you to have a follow-up. We're gonna move on to Lou.
This is also a follow-up on the RPI question earlier. I'm curious about, from what I understand, the RPI, this is for all three of you if you like, or whoever would like to answer it. I understand that you get a few more points for road victories in Dallas Baptist. They're a very fine ball club this year, but we got a few calls that said they may have been artificially a little bit higher than they should have been, being ranked number one most of the year. And I'm curious, is that factor playing into it where maybe more teams will be trying to have a lot more road victories or road games scheduled than what there are now?
Dave, if you'd begin.
Sure. Well, I think that goes back to my point that our programs have been very intelligent and have listened and have scheduled appropriately and looked for ways to improve their RPIs. And that has benefited programs. But going back to my other point, that the RPI is only one factor that the committee uses. And we're aware of those things. We look at schedules. We look at where they played, who they played, how they played, wins. All of those things are factored in. And then again, that's back to that performance measure. And then we begin to look at how we will seed teams or how they'll slot into the field. So it's been a point. We've heard that before, and the committee has talked about that piece of the RPI formula. A couple coaches have brought it to our attention, as they do. So
We'll go on in the back to John.
This one's for Dave and Damani. The growth of the game has obviously increased. You guys mentioned the Big Ten and Northern schools investing, so that adds more teams that are committed and they want a piece of the pie, I guess you could say. So there's just I think Schlossnagel made mention of it earlier, that the line between winning and losing is thinner than it's ever been. So with all that factored in, I mean, how much consideration is there to increasing this field of 64, since there are so many teams that have they're pouring a lot of money and resources into trying to be competitive, and there are a lot of good teams left out. I don't know how much there has been, if there's been an increase in conversation about that, but just curious how much consideration has been made lately in terms of a field increase.
Damani, would you begin?
Sure. Specifically, no, we haven't talked about it a whole lot as a committee. I think philosophically, I guess you have to kind of ask yourself a few questions. One, what's the point of the tournament? In my perspective, the point's to determine the best team in the country, and that field of 64 is who we think have a legitimate argument at saying we deserve an opportunity to compete to be the best in the country based on what we've done in the regular season. We have an automatic qualification process that at least gives every conference the right to send one person into the tournament. So the question really for everybody is, once you get past 64, are there other teams beyond that, not that just need a reward for a great season, but have a legitimate argument at saying, we think we're one of the best teams in the country and should be in that fight based on what we've done in the regular season? I don't know the answer to that, but I think that's the question you've got to ask.
I don't think I can add anything more to that. That's very similar to what I would say.
All right, we're going to have Kendall with his question, and then two more, and that'll be the end of the press conference.
Just first on the national seat thing, just real quick again. I guess to kind of educate us, because I don't know how the softball stuff works completely, but what is the difference? We talk about the difficulty of selecting 16. That's certainly difficult. I know what you guys deal with 1 through 8, but what is different about the way the softball is able to do it that would make it more difficult in baseball? What's the difference there between the two sports?
Damani, can you speak to that?
I think the short answer is probably I don't know. I think we went through this exercise maybe 3 or 4 years ago as a committee and said, okay, and I think we did it during our summer meeting and said, had we actually seeded 1 through 16, where would we have done it? And what we found is, there were a lot more flights. Teams were playing out of their region, so it costs more. There's a toll on teams to have to fly across the country and trying to minimize that. And then you've got conference matchups is the other thing that you really get into that. So, okay, you've got however many SEC teams are number 1 overall seeds. To what extent do we want to protect them in the super regionals? And it's very difficult to protect them in the super regionals if you're seeding 1 through 16 and doing straight pairings along that line. And then you start making sort of accommodations for, okay, well, we are going to protect them. So then instead of making this team the 10 seed, we're going to make them the 12 seed. Well, if you're going to do that, then what's the point of seeding 1 through 16? So when the committee had that conversation, again, it was a few years ago, ultimately they said, no, let's not head down that path. Where we are now is where we want to be.
Yeah, I think that background, we found that while you do open up some new opportunities, you see yourself conflicted in some new ways that maybe you see in softball, where some teams align themselves in that next round in a similar fashion, just depending on how you slot it in on the 1 through 16. And right now we think the game and the tournament is vibrant and it's robust. It's tremendous drama. There's great focus to those games and to those regions, and we don't think it's broken. That doesn't mean that it can't be adjusted to provide, again, all of those pieces, and then the best competitive factors that we can align appropriately for each program. And it's kind of trying to balance those pieces to get to the best fit. So not an easy, quick, yay, thumbs up, thumbs down answer to that. I mean,
one of the things we heard kind of in our super regional follow-up was from, and I don't think it's, I think we can say this is, Fullerton playing at Louisville. And, again, they're playing out of their traditional time zone, kind of body clock times. And again, that's an issue that gets created when you send team from the West Coast to the East Coast in time zone and you're trying to program it for television. So more of those issues get created when teams are kind of flying all over the place.
And one follow-up on a different issue or different topic, I guess would be the right word. I guess I'm sure you guys are aware Randy Mazey throughout the spring kind of passed along his proposal about the season and moving it back, and I haven't been able to talk to you guys about it, but what are your thoughts on moving the season back that much? Not officially, but just kind of just off the cuff opinion on making that kind of move.
Craig, could you begin?
It's a tough question. There's a lot of factors that go into it that I don't think have been brought to light. Moving the season's one thing, and I don't think anybody would disagree. Is it a better time to play baseball? Absolutely. How does it fit into our academic calendar? How does it fit in with school? How does it fit in with internships? The costs, there are costs. And is that best for baseball, or is it best for 20 of the top teams in the country? You know, we're talking about meals. If you talk $35 a day per student athlete, and instead of being a 2-week period, you're talking 90 days or 3 months. How does that work in? And the freshman walk-on student athlete, and every one of these teams is filled with some walk-ons. If they pay 100% of their school and they do it during the school year and then they do it during the summertime, what are those costs? And how about housing and meals and all these things that work into it? It sounds like an easy question. Are you in favor of it on the surface? Possibly yes, but then you dig deeper and how that would really work within our collegiate model, it's very difficult. And I never want to be the guy that puts down why we can't do something. We got to look into it, but we're a long ways from getting there, I think. But would I like to play baseball during the summertime? Absolutely. Is it the right time to be discussing it? You know, that's debatable.
Yeah, I think I'm on record as saying I think it's an important piece for all of us to continue to talk about. I think adjusting the season in some way is beneficial. The more we can play in good weather is good for the game of baseball, good for the outcomes. There are a number of factors in moving the season dramatically that would need to be addressed. And you know, are we going to go way outside the box and talk about a different model? Are we going to talk about year-round school? Are we going to talk about different things like that would address costs? You know, there are real-time costs to programs that, again, a certain element of our population of teams and programs can handle, but that others may be very seriously disadvantaged. Even though the weather movement would help them, they're not in a position resource-wise to do that. And that would hurt our game to have those programs question why if they can continue to do it.
And if I could, you know, that is just one of probably 10 different proposals that coaches have. And I love that Randy Mazey brings that forward. I love the passion he's put towards that. I want our coaches to continue to think, how do we improve the game? And then we vet it through and see how we become better as a sport. And so my job is to continue to manage those things and try to build trust and then talk with the NCAA, with commissioners, with athletic directors to try to make positive change for our student athletes ultimately. So I like that we continue to have these type of discussions. I think it's healthy for us.
We'll take one more question. John?
Well, I guess just along those same lines for Damani, why is the academic calendar kind of important? Craig mentioned it, I've heard it a lot in this discussion, and I assume there's importance to it, but you know, football starts practice in August before school, and volleyball and soccer begin before school, and that kind of thing. So just, clarify what the importance of not going into the summer or trying to avoid, you know, having the whole full season extend.
Sure. I think for this conversation and others, I think it's, again, underscore the point, these are students who are participating in athletics, and so that student portion is incredibly important. So the further we shift the season away from the traditional academic calendar, I think, is when particularly our college presidents begin to feel a little bit of discomfort about the model that we have. These students, these are athletes that are also students, and if you've got student athletes who are playing the bulk of their season when the traditional academic calendar is not occurring, when most of the traditional student body is not on campus, that educational experience, that social experience is very different. I think for our fall sports, one, we fight against that creep and we have rules about when students can come on campus to start practice, but I also feel like that preseason, I think culturally people feel like that's a little bit different than the bulk of your regular season being during the summer.
Seeing no further questions, Damani, Dave, Craig, thanks for joining us.
Could I'm
Sure,
sorry.
go ahead.
Do they have the talking points, some of the academic issues that we talk about?
I don't think so, no.
If I can just ask two things, if we could share the academic portion,
Yep.
if you could look at the academic portion, we'll put talking points each year about what we think's happened great with our game. But when you look at the academic portion of our teams here with the graduation rates and the APR, and you compare that to the other sports, I'm gonna throw a plug in for baseball.
Yeah.
Take a look at that, and I hope someone writes that, what's happening on the stage, and then on the, because the couple talks are home runs, kids getting drafted, national champion. But this other piece of information, I hope doesn't go unnoticed. It's really incredible. When I read it, it was it's really, really incredible.
And I just follow up. We did a lot of work with the game of baseball several years ago to focus in on how our students would have success, how we could design our model so they could have success. And we believe it's working. We believe it's been impactful. Great work by coaches, great work by administrators, obviously by the NCAA to put our students in a position to be successful academically and have great success on the field as well.
And this will be available as well if you'd like to see this, to quote it.
Yep. We'll find a way to get you guys all that stuff, probably upstairs through JD or something.
Once again, thank you everyone for joining us. The next press conference will begin at 2 o'clock with the 4 coaches that play tomorrow.